Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive presented by Safety One Source for all of you safety and risk management professionals out there. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's probably pretty familiar to you, OSHA complaints and referrals. But we're going to be going a little bit deeper than usual into this, and I've got just the expert to help me do it. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. Now, when we talk about OSHA complaints and referrals, what's the big difference there?
Well, it can be confusing for some folks. I like to think of it as a complaint's kind of like, somebody raising their hand in the workplace. So it's an employee or the representative that's flagging, a potential safety or health hazard. Whereas a referral is more like, an outside tip. Maybe it's a media report or another government agency like an OSHA or even an employer self-reporting a non-fatal accident.
So you're telling me even like a news article could trigger an OSHA investigation?
Absolutely. OSHA, they try to stay on top of things. They have a lot of different sources that they use to get information. And it's all outlined, in their field operations manual, Chapter 9 specifically.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll have to check that out. Now, when we talk about complaints, we've got formal complaints and non-formal complaints. What makes a complaint formal?
The big thing there is the signature. So a formal complaint has to be in writing, signed by the employee or their representative. And it has to allege either an imminent danger or a specific violation. Anything else is going to be considered non-formal.
So even those online submissions through OSHA's website, those aren't automatically formal.
Right. Those start out as non-formal, but there is a little trick there. If the employee puts in their name and clicks that electronic signature box, then it automatically becomes a formal complaint.
So it's all about that digital John Hancock.
That's a good way to put it.
So I think what all of our listeners are waiting for is the big question. When does an OSHA inspection actually happen?
Well, a valid formal complaint is pretty much a guaranteed trigger for an inspection. But there are other situations as well, like if an employer doesn't respond to an inquiry from OSHA, that can lead to an on-site inspection.
So you're saying just acknowledging that you got the inquiry isn't enough?
Right. You need to provide a full and timely response. And you really want to show OSHA that you're taking the concern seriously.
So documentation is really important here.
Absolutely.
Anything else that might surprise our listeners?
Well, any allegation of an imminent danger, that's always going to trigger an inspection, whether or not there's a formal complaint.
That makes sense.
Right. They want to make sure they're protecting workers.
You mentioned inquiries earlier. What exactly happens during one of those?
Well, let's say OSHA gets a complaint, but it doesn't quite meet all the criteria for an immediate inspection. So they'll reach out to the employer, usually through a phone call or an email, to let them know about the alleged hazard or violation. And then they ask for a detailed response from the employer.
So they really want the employer to tell their side of the story.
Exactly. And it's important for employers to show that they're on top of things. They've got procedures in place and they're addressing the issue.
Now, what's this I hear about employers having to post the inquiry?
Well, OSHA actually encourages employers to post a copy of the inquiry letter and their response for all employees to see.
So they want you to make it public.
It's really about transparency. It shows everyone that the employer is taking things seriously.
That's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about complainant protection. What's done to protect those who file complaints?
That's a great question, and it's something that OSHA takes very seriously. Complainants actually have the right to remain anonymous. So that means their employer doesn't have to know who filed the complaint.
So even if OSHA does an inspection, the employer might not know who started that whole process.
Exactly. And, there's even broader protection for employees. It's called Section 11C of the OSH Act, and it protects whistleblowers from retaliation just because they raise safety concerns.
So employees shouldn't be afraid to speak up.
Exactly. They have a right to a safe workplace.
That's great information. And I think that's a good place to stop for now. We've covered a lot of ground here today, but we'll be back with more insights and practical takeaways in the next part of our deep dive, presented by Safety One Source.
Welcome back, everybody, to our deep dive on OSHA complaints and referrals, presented by Safety One Source.
It's amazing how much there is to know about this.
Yeah.
Even though it's something that safety professionals deal with all the time.
Absolutely. And, the devil's in the details. And when it comes to OSHA compliance, those details, they can really make a difference.
So for our listeners out there who are, managing safety and risk, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from what we've talked about so far?
Well, I think the most important thing is to really understand the difference between a complaint and a referral. Where that information is coming from and what triggers a response from OSHA. That can really help you anticipate, potential issues.
So you're saying it's about understanding how OSHA is going to react in a given situation.
Right. It's like having a little cheat sheet to OSHA's playbook. And while we're on the topic of being prepared, let's talk about documentation.
Ah, yes. Documentation, every safety professional's best friend.
It's true. It can be a lot to keep track of. But trust me, meticulous record keeping is essential. Keep good records of everything, safety concerns, complaints, referrals, inquiries, your responses, literally everything. Not only does it help demonstrate compliance, but it also provides, a valuable data. So you can identify trends and find areas for improvement.
So it's not just about checking boxes, it's about using that information to get better.
Exactly. And, speaking of being proactive, training is also key.
Oh, absolutely.
Make sure your employees understand their rights. They know how to report safety concerns, and they're familiar with the company's procedures. That can go a long way in preventing those issues from even coming up.
It's about empowering employees to be part of the solution. And along those lines, communication is also really important, right?
Right. Keep those lines of communication open. Talk to your employees, talk to management, talk to OSHA. Share information about safety protocols, updates to regulations, lessons learned from past incidents. You want to create that collaborative approach to safety.
You're breaking down those silos.
That's a good way to put it.
And I'm guessing that you need buy-in from leadership to make that happen.
You got it. When leaders prioritize safety, it sets the tone for the whole organization. They allocate the resources, they hold everyone accountable.
So it becomes a core value, not just, something that the safety department is responsible for. Now, we've talked a lot about the current landscape, but the world of work is constantly changing. What are some things you see coming down the pike that might affect how we handle OSHA complaints and referrals in the future?
That's a great question, and it's something that I think about a lot. One of the biggest trends we're seeing is the rise of automation and AI in the workplace.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right? And, while these technologies have the potential to make workplaces safer by taking over dangerous tasks, they also introduce a whole new set of potential hazards.
So it's like uncharted territory in terms of safety.
Exactly. We need to start thinking about how to protect workers from robot malfunctions, how to make sure AI systems are making safe decisions, and how to properly train employees to work alongside these new technologies.
So it's a whole new set of risks.
That's right. And then on top of that, you have the gig economy, with more and more people working as independent contractors or freelancers. And these individuals are often working outside traditional workplaces.
So that raises a lot of questions about who's responsible for safety.
Right. How do you ensure they're getting the right training? How do you even handle complaints and referrals in those less structured environments?
It's a whole new world.
So how do we as safety professionals stay ahead of the curve? Well, first and foremost, stay informed. Subscribe to OSHA updates, attend conferences, read publications, network with other safety professionals. You need to be a sponge, constantly absorbing new information.
So it's not enough to just know the rules today. You got to be looking ahead.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to engage with OSHA directly. Attend their training sessions, utilize their resources, even consider participating in industry advisory committees. It's about building that partnership.
Working together to improve safety for everyone.
That's the goal. And, I think it's also important for us as safety professionals to take some time for self-reflection.
Self-reflection, what do you mean?
Step back and assess your own performance. Identify areas where you can improve. Make sure you're up to date on the latest knowledge and best practices.
So it's about continuous learning.
Exactly. We should never stop learning and growing in this profession.
Well said. I think that's a great point to keep in mind. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, from practical takeaways to emerging trends. But we're not done yet. We'll be back with even more insights and a final thought-provoking question. In our final segment, brought to you by Safety One Source. Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive on OSHA complaints and referrals, presented by Safety One Source.
We've covered a lot of ground, but I think the most exciting part is still ahead of us.
The future, right. So when you look into your crystal ball, what do you see? What are the big things you're thinking about when it comes to the future of workplace safety?
Well, things are changing so fast. New technologies, new ways of working, and it's a lot to keep up with. But as safety professionals, we need to be thinking about those challenges now.
So we can be prepared.
Exactly. And one thing that's really on my mind is nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology.
It's got the potential to revolutionize so many industries. but we're still learning about the potential risks to workers.
It's like we're opening up this whole new world.
Right, and we need to make sure we're doing it safely.
What about 3D printing? That seems to be getting more and more popular.
Absolutely, and it's another area where we need to be careful. It often involves hazardous materials, and we need to make sure we've got the right safety protocols in place.
It's all about identifying those hazards before they become a problem.
Right, and then there's virtual reality.
VR.
Yeah, it's not just for video games anymore. It's being used for training design, even remote work.
But what about the safety implications?
Exactly. We're spending more and more time in these virtual worlds, and we need to figure out how to keep people safe.
So it sounds like we've got a lot of work to do.
We do, but it's exciting work. We have the chance to shape the future of workplace safety.
And make sure these new technologies are implemented responsibly.
I like the way you put that.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into OSHA complaints and referrals presented by Safety One Source. Remember, knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay ahead of the curve. Until next time, stay safe.